in the course of collecting this information, we my translator said we could go to, if you want to go to a remote rural area, we can go to my family's village. And I said, that's fine, let's do that. And she managed to get a message to them, and by the time we arrived in her aunt and uncle's house, there was a whole group of people waiting for us to arrive. In this case, women. And they sat around, they told their stories, they had comments to make about all the schooling and the work that they did in the countryside and on the farms, of course. And they also said that they valued the sewing circles that had been set up by the donor nations, and because they could go there. No one said they couldn't go to a sewing circle. It wasn't as if it were a feminist education session or something like that, which they wouldn't have got permission to attend. But what was to stop them from talking about things that concerned the women once they were there, and they would welcome anyone from outside coming in to talk to them about health issues, childcare issues, what in fact their rights were in terms of employment, education, and health, and so on. This had an interesting development a couple of weeks later when we got back to Pristina. UNHCR in Pristina had received a notification from the United States, who had in fact given $10 million to the women of Kosovo, and in fact my work was leading towards a plan to use that $10 million. But meanwhile, this story about sewing circles had reached certain people in Washington, and we had this request for an explanation of why there should be any support for sewing circles, and what advance was that going to be in helping women of Kosovo. The person who had generated this was the Republican head of the Senate in Washington, Mitch McConnell. Now, his name has come up many times since then. It's well known that he's a very conservative, elderly man, and he has on his staff a very anti-feminist woman who was generating the questions that they wanted answered. And Maureen said to me, I have no idea how to answer this question. And I said, well, we've had experience of this on our tour around Kosovo, and the women want these circles to be supported, and they have very good reasons for it, as I mentioned earlier. And she said, oh, well, that's helpful. And she started writing a brief for Senator McConnell. And she showed it to me. I said, Maureen, this is really clogged up. It's not sharp enough for a politician to use as an answer. And the way to do this is to state the case, state the reasons that we know from research that women want this, how it can be set up, and what the advantages are of it. And it should be no more than about 2 pages long. And if you want to add more background detail, then you put it into appendix attached to this answer. Maureen had the greatest trouble in the world she had no experience at all, as I had experience in Australia, of answering possible parliamentary questions. And this is the way you do it. You don't clog up the answer with a mass of detail that no one's going to read. Well, she said, well, will you amend this for me? I said, yes, I'll be pleased to amend it. The deputy head of UNHCR was a New Zealander, and I met him on the stairs one day, and he said, Elaine, thank you for that help. It's not exactly part of your job description, but it was very, very useful. And I said, well, John McKinnon, his name was, I've had some experience of this in Australia, and you've got to start with a knowledge of who you're talking to, not try to demonstrate how much you know. So, yeah, we didn't get any more queries or questions or orders from the Congress thereafter.